Now, Theresa May will use a speech at a Conservative Friends of Israel reception this afternoon to tackle the increase of anti-Semitism in the UK.
The Prime Minister will vow to call out hatred towards Jewish people by introducing an official definition of anti-Semitism. Well, we're joined now by Jonathan Sacerdoti, a campaigner against anti-Semitism. First of all, do we believe that this definition will do anything to tackle the problem?
I think it's a really good thing that Theresa May is adopting this definition and making it very clear to everyone that this is government policy now. The definition itself isn't that new. There was something called the EUMC working definition before this one, and it's very similar. But what her adoption of this as government policy shows is that there is a clear line over what is and is not anti-Semitic. And Jewish people who've complained about acts of anti-Semitism against them have often been met with people saying that it's not anti-Semitism, it might be anti-Israel or anti-Zionist, and they have no right to say so. So definitions like this one make it really easy for the law enforcement and Crown Prosecution Service to show what is and is not legal.
OK, give us some examples, Jonathan, if you can, because clearly there is some concern that it might, some people feel it might be used to close down debate, criticism of Israel. How might it be used, for instance, prosecuting hate speech? Give us an example. I
think, in fact, the important thing to note is that this will make it easier to debate issues without there being a problem of anti-Semites hijacking legitimate causes. Exactly. And so when there are those people who wish to attack Jews and feel they can do it by pinning their attack on Jews to something that disguises their hatred of Jewish people, maybe to do with Israel, that means that we can have legitimate debate about Israel now without those anti-Semites hijacking the cause. And some examples that you're talking about vary enormously because there's a terror threat known against Jewish people. If we just think back to the last few years, we've seen Jewish people targeted and killed by Islamist terrorists in Toulouse, Paris, Brussels. We've seen that happening across Europe and the wider world. Those things have put a bit of fear into people who know that that could happen here. But at the other end of the spectrum, there's hate speech online, there's abuse of people like Luciana Berger MP, who just had her troll who had abused her hideously with anti-Semitic slurs and attacks put in prison for this. There's everything in between. So it could be a feeling of hatred, it could be a rising climate of attack, it could be physical attacks on people, Jewish places of worship, Jewish community centres, all the way through to terrorism.
Now, Theresa May, by issuing this definition today, is obviously outlining government policy, but it's also an opportunity for her, I suppose, to stand there and say, we are the party that wants to really lead on this, a kind of dig, if you will, at the Labour Party. And when we see that there have been problems of anti-Semitism within the Labour Party, and we see how pervasive the problem is even within Westminster, and how concerning is that when we're trying to live in an age where we're tackling it out, stamp it out?
It's hugely concerning to Jewish people and non-Jewish people who care about this issue to see the opposition party having all these problems about anti-Semitism within its ranks. And while they did have the Chakrabarti inquiry into anti-Semitism, it was widely seen as something of a whitewash in large parts of the Jewish community because it didn't really specifically tackle individual cases like that of Gerald Kaufman MP or even Ken Livingstone, and instead seemed to make piecemeal attempts to try and give an impression of making things better. The Labour Party has responded to Theresa May's announcement today by saying they too accept this definition. So, as with the Labour Party and the Conservative Party, we'll have to wait to see if this is translated into concrete action that will actually help the Jewish community.
Can I just go back to the definition and its practical aspects? Sometimes with hate speech, the concern is that the evidential test is purely in the mind of the beholder. So if I feel that you've said something to me which is, let's say, anti-Semitic, it's for me to decide it's anti-Semitic, not for an outside agency. And some people, that worries, because you get all kinds of crimes that then can be described as racist, homophobic, anti-Semitic, because the evidential test isn't decided by a third party, Crown Prosecution Service, let's say, it's down to the individual who feels themselves to be a victim. Does that bother you?
Well, there is that Macpherson principle from when there was the Macpherson report, where we have to listen to the feelings of the person who says they've been attacked, who says that something might have been anti-Semitic or racist in another way. But of course, it's a very good point. We don't want to hamper freedom of speech, and people have the right to express opinions that are unpalatable and horrible to many people in society without it being made illegal.
So the test is inciting violent action, isn't it?
I think the test can often be in inciting violent action or creating a climate where there's incitement to violent action. And we've seen just in today's news as well the prescription of the neo-Nazi group, National Action. This is another example of how anti-Semitism can come from the far right, the far left, Islamists, and all brew into this perfect storm that's no good for Jewish people.
Isn't there a danger, Jonathan, that actually all that happens here is that people are a bit more careful about the semantics? So they'll be every bit as anti-Semitic as they were, but they won't use the word Jew, they'll use the word Israeli.
I think that's part of what this definition is actually about, because in the further notes in the description of the anti-Semitism description given by the body that came up with the definition, we can see that they give specific examples, and among those are in fact to do with Israel. They say things like attacking all Jews for the actions of the State of Israel, or holding the State of Israel to a higher double standard than you would other states, can in fact reveal that there was an anti-Semitic intention behind what people are saying and doing. And that's very important, because I think that many Jewish people wish to express support for the State of Israel, but in so doing, they don't wish to forfeit the right to say when people have attacked them in an anti-Semitic way, either physically or verbally, and this will help the prosecuting authorities be able to show when that was the intent.
OK, Jonathan Sacerdoti, thanks very much indeed.